With my old ass, Megan Park delivers another coming of age story, but this one focuses on a young woman meeting herself in the future and questioning the sexuality she thought she was very much firm in. So to summarize the film, with Elliot going to the University of Toronto in the fall, this is going to be her last summer, potentially working on her family's cranberry farm. And with that in mind, she's going to work the farm, hook up with this girl who she's liked for a long time, hang out with her friends, and that was the initial plan. However, while getting high with her friends on shrooms, her 18-year-old self meets her 39-year-old self, and this changes things. For while unfortunately her 39-year-old self doesn't give like financial tips saying that, hey, this is going to be the new stock that's going to make people rich, she does give her advice in the form of simple things like, hey, be nicer to your brother, hang out with your mom, get to know your family better. And she also wants her do not, under any circumstances, get close to someone named Chad. Now, what is it about Chad that's so bad? That is something that 18-year-old Elliot questions, especially because there's something about Chad. Granted, he kind of infuriates her in a way, but at the same time, she kind of wants to be close to him and protect him maybe. And being that she's a gold star lesbian, like for her whole life, has really only been with women, this is very kind of curious. And unfortunately, like so many things, older Elliot likes to dodge questions, not give full answers. So while Elliot's developing these feelings, they're trying to get in contact with their older selves to realize what exactly you're trying to warn me from. And that's what the film explores for the most part. So get into the review section. One of the highlights you have to mention is that when it comes to sexuality, as much as this is pushed at maybe millennials, Gen Z, or whatever comes after Gen Z, seemingly has made it so that sexuality isn't as complicated as it used to be. That's not necessarily true. Well, yes, when it comes to bisexuality, even pansexuality in some ways, there's David Bowie, Anna Paquin, Tessa Thompson, Tinashe, Kiki Palmer, and others. That doesn't mean for a person's individual journey, it's gonna make the being a spectrum any easier. Never mind, when it comes to Elliot, there's always the need to kind of question the whole biological versus environment thing. Like, is she because of her brain chemistry, predisposed to liking women? Potentially, yes, but also considering her environment, she's a farm girl, and granted, she's probably not the only farm girl, and she's found a queer community, clearly, but what does that mean in terms of her sexuality and her maybe not really finding the type of guys that she could potentially like, because she's from this rural town where everybody knows everybody. And I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I'm a psychologist that I can really like dig deep into Elliot, because her story is a little bit beyond what I can comprehend in some ways as a dude who, granted, is not straight and narrow, but still. Point of the matter is, it's interesting to still see that people are still questioning their sexuality, exploring their sexuality, and watching that in a film, even if it's a girl who I can't directly relate to, is still something that allows you to see that while there has been much progress for gay men, lesbian women, trans women, not so much trans men, in terms of bisexuals, pansexuals, and people who are a bit more open and not just, I like this one thing and this one thing only, there's still progress to be made. And thankfully, films like My Old Ass are trying to widen the berth so that there's more representation and examples out there, so that you don't have a conundrum like Elliot did about liking a guy and thinking that you're betraying your community, or any type of other issues where you feel like your identity that's been built up and established is now conflicting with this one thing that messes with the matrix, for lack of a better way of putting it. Getting to the next highlight, we also really appreciate what older Elliot's relationship is to her younger self, as well as the relationship we see develop with Chad. And granted, there are some odd moments where you see the younger Elliot and the older Elliot have that sort of weird idea of, hey, what would it be like to have an intimate moment with yourself at a different time period, which I don't know how to process that, but it is what it is. And looking beyond that, they do have a nice sisterly type relationship where even if Elliot is not trying to reveal what's going to happen in the future, in terms of giving advice and trying to guide her younger self in a way, it does allow for some cute moments. But Chad is a whole different story, and Chad gives you the kind of scenes that it allows for both the complexity of Elliot's journey as somebody who primarily identifies as queer, but there's this guy who feels like an exception. And at the same time, there's this friendship and relationship that you can tell is setting precedents for her that perhaps other women haven't really reached the heights of. And it's part of that whole self-discovery in terms of her living her life as a queer person, specifically as a lesbian, and what this guy does to her that is perplexing and kind of sends her through a whole new coming of age process in terms of her sexuality, since granted she's still only 18, so the whole coming of age process isn't fully done because she's still living under her parents. But it's the realization of that she can like men, love a guy, even want to have sexual intimacy with him, that as much as that could be seen as something dirty in some type of way, especially because there is some nudity in this film, at the same time it feels more like an emotional journey than it is a sexual journey, which was a little unexpected. With all that said, unfortunately, while this film does do a lot of different things and perhaps new things, though new is probably not the right word, probably more so not often marketed in a way that's accessible, I have to admit that unfortunately, like a lot of films, once there is a guy who really just enchants the lead character, everything else begins to fall to the wayside. This was supposed to be the final summer that, Elliot's friends are going to be accessible, yet they kind of disappear. We don't even know what they're doing while Elliot's not paying attention to them. And while you get is her final summer, she doesn't know if Chad's going to be someone she'll see in the fall, or else see again. It could be just a summer fling. Her not really keeping in contact with her friends, the whole girl that she liked forever and a day just kind of falling off, and there's no phone calls or texts even from the girl. That seemed kind of weird. And yes, she does follow her older version's advice and, gets closer to her brother, gets closer to her mom. Not so much her dad or the youngest brother, but it's one of those things where you have to realize that with Chad being a potential first love, of course, that's going to be all-consuming, and that's going to be the main thing she focuses on. And then when it comes to her family, because they're there, they're accessible, so of course she's going to follow up with what her older version said and try to make some type of connection. And then with her friends, it's not convenient, so they live their lives, I live mine type of situation. But it's, considering the relationships that are built up, the fact that one of Elliot's friends seems to be one of her key connections to the queer community, and that sort of goes to the wayside. And then the other friend, played by Madeline Ziegler, the one who was in all the Sia videos, she's just there in a few scenes and doesn't really do much. It just seems like, as much as you have to recognize everything that's done between Elliot and Chad, and to the point that you could possibly cry because of certain reveals toward the end of the movie, at the same time, it's hard to see potential storylines of what could be done with characters not being tapped into while still getting all you could want out of a different character. It's like this, it's imbalanced in a way that doesn't ruin the movie whatsoever, but it does leave you longing for the stuff that didn't get explored like you may want, especially while you're watching the film. Overall, when it comes to My Old Ass, if it just focused on Elliot's relationship with her older self and Chad, this film would be wonderful. Barely anything that needs to be criticized or questioned. But because it expands beyond those two characters and brings in her parents, her brothers, two friends, it makes it so that while I wouldn't say this film is bloated, it does leave you wanting more, and knowing that this film is straight up a film, not a limited series, isn't meant to be a jump off for a limited series or a full-length series, it presents a sort of frustration in you that you'll get over, but it may linger whenever you think about this movie or talk about it like we are right now.